Okay guys, well by now most of you would be aware that Oklahoma has just recorded their strongest ever earthquake, and a 5.6 magnitude earthquake has just struck approximately 55 miles northwest of Tulsa, and it was felt in areas across Oklahoma, Kansas, Texas, Nebraska, Arkansas, Missouri and Iowa. So a very strong earthquake, and unfortunately now what we are seeing is the mainstream media are trying to connect this earthquake to fracking. And this is because they want to move the masses into a state of complacency. They want the masses to believe that they are in control of everything, including these negative events, because this is due to their activity and their fracking, which is causing large earthquakes. And therefore this gives the masses a belief that they can fix this, they can change this. If they just stop fracking, then they can stop these earthquakes. Now, anybody that's actually doing the independent research that is needed to have an understanding of all of these events that are taking place around our planet knows that we are seeing an increase in these earthquakes everywhere. They're not just happening in America, we're seeing them happening all over the planet. Now, these earthquakes really started increasing in intensity and frequency since the big quake that we had in Italy. And in this video, I warned that we could expect to see an increase in earthquakes in both their size and their frequency, because I was observing aftershocks in the hundreds after this quake that happened in Italy. And to date, Italy has had over 2,000 aftershocks. And this is something that I have not observed in the data, and I have been watching the earthquake data for a very long time. So this is why I knew when I saw all of these aftershocks happening after this big quake in Italy that this was something that I hadn't seen before, and it was something that was significant and that we needed to pay attention. So I will actually post this video underneath, link it in the description under this video, and you can look at this previous video I have done in relation to the quakes and why we are experiencing these earthquakes and how we can expect to see more of these earthquakes in areas all around the planet, and they are going to increase in size and increase in their frequency because the plates are shifting. And we can see this because the plate between the Pacific and the Australian plate, the boundary, experienced a 7.1 earthquake just north of New Zealand on the 1st of September, which coincidentally was also timed with the annular solar eclipse. So very interesting that we do see this eclipse happening, and then we see this very large quake striking off northern New Zealand, right on the boundary between the Pacific and the Australian plates, because these plates are moving. The Pacific plate is moving down and the Australian plate is moving up. This is why all of these Pacific islands are seeing an increase in their sea levels rising. It's not because the sea levels are actually increasing, it's because they are actually sinking. And again, I have done videos in regards to this, and I will link a video explaining these shifts we are now experiencing in the tectonics underneath in the description as well, and you can check that out if you want. So we've seen 7.1 off New Zealand. We know they're not fracking on that boundary between the two plates. We've also just seen a 5.9 quake hit the Philippines, and we know that they're not fracking in the Philippines. We know that they're not fracking in Italy where they had the quake. There was also a large quake in Iceland yesterday. We know they're not fracking there. There was also a large quake on Easter Island. We know they're not fracking there. So if people want to buy into the fracking story because it serves to allow them to move into normalcy bias, that's fine. But I'm about actually providing the information that we are seeing all over the planet, not just looking at what the mainstream media are reporting and moving into this state of complacency because it sounds better to believe that it's just fracking that's causing these strong earthquakes. Now, as you can see, Italy is still experiencing aftershocks. Oklahoma is now experiencing aftershocks after that 5.6, and I wouldn't be surprised if that continues. Now, if we look at the magnitude 5+ earthquakes, we can see that there's been a big increase since we had that 7.1 off the North Island of New Zealand. This site has it at a 7.0. They do actually change the magnitude depending on where you're accessing the data. But as we can see, there is a lot of movement between those two plates. And since we've had this large quake off the North Island of New Zealand, we can see that they are picking up in intensity and frequency everywhere. And as I said, we are also seeing them over in parts of the planet such as Iceland and also Easter Island, where we saw 2 large quakes happening yesterday. And these quakes are not something that we usually see in these areas. So when we actually see larger quakes happening in areas that they aren't usually known for a lot of tectonic activity, it's something we need to pay attention to, because if you're just going to wait for the mainstream media to report to you when you should worry about this and when you should actually start preparing for these earth changes to perhaps impact you negatively, then you are going to be blindsided with the rest of the masses, because they are not going to be told. They will not tell you when these events are going to start increasing to a point where you may experience them in a negative way. Now, we've also seen an eruption and the dome collapsing at the Sinabung volcano in Indonesia. This was from the 3rd of September. The actual side of the volcano here has collapsed. Again, we're seeing this activity connected to the earthquakes. Now, are they fracking here as well? Are they fracking all of the volcanoes that we're seeing an increase in their activity all over the planet this year too? So again, people can move into this normalcy bias and this state of complacency and blame it on fracking because it makes them feel better, because they haven't been doing the work to prepare for these events and prepare for these changes and these shifts that are happening and escalating all around the planet, or they can actually just accept that this is something that they are going to have to deal with, because they are not going to stop. They are just going to keep increasing. And this is why I continue to do these videos, so that I can prepare people to understand that they will not be able to avoid these events. Even if you are in areas where you don't normally experience earthquakes or earth changes relating to hurricanes and flooding, eventually all of these changes will affect us all. So we need to start preparing for this on every level, not just physical. More importantly, you need to be preparing for these events consciously and spiritually, because it's the outcome of these physical events that you are going to have to deal with, just like the people in Louisiana that have to deal with the flooding and deal with having to rebuild their communities and finding that they have to rely on donations from other American citizens because the American government is more focused on funding the military and death machines than they are on helping their own citizens. And so when people start to actually acknowledge that the government are not there to help you, they're not there to tell you the truth, they're there to keep you ignorant, and they're there to keep you helpless. So if you want to keep leaving your safety in their hands, then you are going to be caught out because they are not going to tell you the truth. They are just going to tell you what you want to hear, that it's all the fault of fracking. It's all man-made activity. It's not man-made activity. We exist in a cycle. We are moving towards the end of an age now, and this is why we can expect all of these earth changes to begin escalating and impacting us everywhere. And as I said, on all three levels, not just physically, but spiritually and consciously, because everything physical originates in the spiritual and originates on the conscious plane as well. Consciously, spiritually, it's just as important as physically. And if people can't identify that, if you've been looking at all of this information over the last few years and you still haven't identified the spiritual nature behind all of this, then really, I don't know why you're bothering. Just give up now, because you're going to be no better than those who were still fast asleep. You're going to be taken out with the masses, and you're going to experience the same negative events as they are because you haven't prepared on all three levels. What we were meant to do when we started instinctively waking up because we could see these events were occurring and we could identify that we weren't being told the full story was you were meant to start investigating this independently and put it all together so you could see what the bigger picture was. But if people just decided to go and listen to a particular channel that claims to be a truther channel, that claims to be the one that has all of the information that the government aren't telling you, then you have left yourself open for all of these negative events, because you need to take information from all of the areas: political, earth changes, spiritual, consciously. It is all relevant. It all connects. And if we understand the law of correspondence, because we are using the correct science, Hermetic science, which is thousands of years old, not just like modern science, which is only 100 or so years old. If we go back to the ancients who used the same science for thousands of years, all of the philosophers that used that science to understand creation and understand their environment and understand the reality that they existed in, then we understand that everything is connected. They would have known that all of these earthquakes were connected. They would not have stated that these earthquakes were just happening in one part of the planet and that that was not connected to another earthquake that was happening on another part of the planet. They would have seen everything from a larger perspective, and that's what people need to start doing. You need to start seeing everything from a larger perspective. You need to understand that the establishment and the government are not there to help you. They are not there to save you. They are there to do the least amount that they have to do to appear to be there to help you and save you and care about you. But all of their behavior, when you look at it and you see what they are doing with how they're allowing the infrastructure to crumble, the water infrastructure to poison children, lead contamination in communities, nuclear power stations leaking and crumbling, schools that are so dilapidated that the teachers refuse to teach in them. When you actually look at their behavior, they show you that they do not care about you. They care about what you can do for them, because you are nothing but a slave that keeps their system running so they can keep scraping the cream from the top, and they just give you the dregs. And so if you want to trust what the mainstream media are now saying about these earthquakes because it sounds safer and it sounds better so that you can move back into your normalcy bias, and then you don't have to worry about any of these events and you can just continue going to work every day and you can just continue bringing little Jenny to ballet and little Timmy to soccer, and that's your life and that's the extent of who you think you are, then really I don't even know why you're watching my video, because there is nothing that I can do that can help you have an understanding for what is occurring around your planet and in your country and with your government, or with what is happening on a conscious level or even a spiritual level. If you can't identify this by now in a larger perspective, then really there is something that is stopping you from accepting the facts as they are being shown to us through the evidence when we go and look at this and research it independently. So all I can do is just continue to bring what the information is showing, and this is all I have ever done. I have just reported on the information that I am finding, and this is the same when it comes to the esoteric knowledge that I'm also addressing and also relating in my videos. It is just information that I have found and pieced back together, and then I am just bringing you that information. And so people can either accept this information or they can dismiss it. It is completely up to them. And it doesn't matter to me, and it doesn't matter to truth. It is what it is. And so you can either face the facts and face what all of this is basically showing us and accept that, and then move into a position of power because you do understand this and you can face this with knowledge and with wisdom and with an understanding that you didn't previously have. Or you can just continue listening to the mainstream media. You can continue believing that the government care about you and that they're telling you all of the truth and that they're going to save you when things get really negative. So good luck if that's where you want to have your mentality and you want to leave yourself at the mercy of the government and the establishment. I really hope it works out for you. But for the rest of us that are actually identifying what's happening, and we can see that the mainstream media are not addressing all of these events and all of this increase in tectonic activity around our planet, and they're not addressing the volcanoes that are increasing in activity and how they're connected to all of the earthquakes. So, you know, we can see that just by looking at that, that they're not actually giving us all of the information. Well, anyway, I will leave it here and I will post everything underneath and you can check that out for yourself. And as always, peace out.